Johnny Carson revealed the 9 Golden Age guests he loved the most. For 30 years, Johnny Carson invited America into his late-night living room. As host of The Tonight Show, he interviewed over 22,000 guests, from nervous newcomers to Hollywood legends. But among those thousands, Carson privately maintained a much shorter list. The rare guests who didn't just perform for his audience, but genuinely connected with the man behind the desk. Johnny was the ultimate professional, explained a former Tonight Show producer who worked with Carson for 15 years. But there were certain guests who could make him forget the cameras were rolling. When they visited, Johnny wasn't hosting anymore. He was simply enjoying himself. But first, we need to understand why the man at the top of Carson's list earned his deepest admiration and the emotional moment that revealed just how genuine their connection truly was now. The title of it is It's Bo. That's the name of the dog, Jimmy Stewart, the man who made Carson cry. When Jimmy Stewart appeared on The Tonight Show, viewers witnessed something remarkable. Johnny Carson, television's unflappable master of ceremonies, transformed into an appreciative fan in the presence of genuine Hollywood royalty. Jimmy was everything America wanted to believe about itself, Carson once confided to a close friend. Decent, humble, authentic, the real deal in an industry full of phonies. Stewart's appearances became annual events eagerly anticipated by both the audience and Carson himself. Unlike many aging stars who relied on well-rehearsed anecdotes, Stewart brought a natural, sometimes hesitant quality to his interviews that Carson found refreshingly authentic. Johnny respected that Jimmy never tried to be slick, explained a former Tonight Show producer. He stumbled over words sometimes. He paused to find the right expression. He was just being himself, not performing Jimmy Stewart the way some celebrities would perform versions of themselves. What truly cemented Stewart's place as Carson's favorite guest was a now legendary 1981 appearance when the actor read his poem B about the death of his beloved dog. The simple, heartfelt verses about his golden retriever caused Carson, famous for his emotional restraint, to visibly tear up on national television. "I've never seen Johnny react that way to anything," recalled a camera operator who was present that night. "He was genuinely moved, and he didn't try to hide it or make a joke to break the tension. He just let himself have that human moment with Jimmy and their audience." After that appearance, Stewart's status was sealed. Carson staff knew that when Stewart was booked, their normally exacting boss would be in his most generous mood. "Johnny would actually ask us to extend Jimmy's segments if possible," revealed a former producer. "He'd say, 'See if we can give him another few minutes. Move the commercial if you have to.'" That kind of scheduling change was practically unheard of. Perhaps most telling was how Carson spoke about Stewart when cameras weren't rolling. According to those who worked closely with him, Carson would sometimes reference Stewart's interviews during production meetings as examples of perfect television, authentic moments that justified the medium's existence. That on the night of Carson's final show in 1992, Stewart was one of the few celebrities he personally called Tot Hank. A gesture that spoke volumes about the genuine connection between television's most guarded host and Hollywood's most authentic star. While Stewart represented the dignified, emotional side of Carson's ideal guest, his next favorite brought something entirely different. A mastery of timing that matched Carson's own, make him feel welcome. Let's meet and greet Bob Newhart. Bob Newhart, the comic who made it look effortless. If Jimmy Stewart touched Carson's heart, Bob Newhart connected with his comedic mind. The stand-up comedian turned sitcom star shared Carson's dry wit, perfect timing, and ability to find humor in life's mundane moments. Johnny once called Bob the most effortlessly funny man I know, revealed a writer who worked on The Tonight Show during the 1970s and 80s. Coming from Carson, there was no higher compliment. What distinguished Newhart from other comedians who appeared on the show was his conversational style. Rather than arriving with prepared bits or recycled material from his act, Newhart engaged in genuine dialogue with Carson, their approach that perfectly complemented the host's own strengths. They had this incredible timing between them. Recall a director who worked on many of Newhart's appearances. Bob would start a theory. Johnny would add just the right comment at just the right moment. Bob would build on it. It was like watching two jazz musicians who could anticipate each other's moves perfectly. Carson's appreciation for Newhart was evident in how he broke his own rules when the comedian appeared. Normally strict about keeping segments to their allotted time, Carson would frequently let Newhart run long, sometimes even asking producers to extend his segments at the expense of the guests. If Bob was on a roll, Johnny would just let him go, confirmed a former producer. He'd make the stretch it sign to the control room, which was his signal to delay the commercial break. With most guests, he'd be counting down the seconds until they were done. With Bob, he never wanted it to end. What Carson particularly appreciated about Newhart was his humility. Despite his enormous success, Newhart never arrived with an entourage of special demands. He treated crew members with respect and seemed genuinely grateful for the opportunity to appear on the show. Johnny couldn't stand prima donnas, explained the producer. Bob was the opposite. He'd eat out with the pages, thank the makeup people, remember the names of camera operators he'd met years earlier. Johnny noticed those things. Their professional relationship eventually evolved into a genuine friendship, with the two men occasionally golfing together, a clear indication that Carson, famous for keeping his private life separate from his professional world, truly enjoyed Newhart's company. If Johnny invited you to play golf, that meant he actually liked you as a person, not just as egoist, noted a longtime friend of Carson's. Bob was one of the very few celebrities who crossed that line. While Newhart represented the subtle intellectual comedy Carson admired, his next favorite guest brought something entirely different. Spontaneity and unpredictability that kept Carson on his toes. Would you welcome Burt Reynolds? Applause. Music. Applause. Burt Reynolds, the perfect partner in crime. When Burt Reynolds appeared on The Tonight Show, viewers knew they weren't just watching an interview. They were witnessing a friendly competition between two men who genuinely enjoyed trying to whop each other. Burt gets the game. Most guests don't. Carson reportedly told a producer after a particularly memorable appearance by the mustachioed movie star. Reynolds, at the height of his fame in the 1970s, understood something crucial about television that many other celebrities missed. That the host-guest relationship worked best as a playful partnership rather than simply a promotional opportunity. Johnny loved that Burt came to play not just to plug a movie, explained a former Tonight Show writer. Most stars arrived with talking points from their publicists. Burt arrived with water pistols hidden in his jacket. Their legendary prank wars became a recurring highlight of Reynolds' appearances. In one infamous incident, Reynolds surprised Carson by hitting him in the face with shaving cream during what was supposed to be a serious discussion about an upcoming film. Rather than being annoyed, Carson was delighted by the ambush. According to staff members present, he laughed harder off camera than he did for the audience, genuinely appreciating Reynolds' willingness to shake up the normally predictable talk show format. Johnny loves surprise. Real surprise. Not the fake I didn't expect that question moments most celebrities rehearse, not either director who worked on many of Reynolds' appearances. Burt was one of few guests who could genuinely catch Johnny off guard, and Johnny respected that enormously. What Carson particularly appreciated was Reynolds' ability to take a joke as well as dish one out. When Carson would make quips about Reynolds' failed movies or his high-profile romantic relationships, the actor would laugh along genuinely rather than showing the thin-skinned sensitivity common among Hollywood stars. Johnny had a test for whether he truly liked a celebrity, revealed a longtime producer. Could he tease them without them getting offended? Burt passed that test with flying colors. Hennett only took the jokes well. He encouraged them. The genuine friendship between the two men was evident in how Carson spoke about Reynolds when their actor wasn't on the show. According to staff members, Carson would often reference Reynolds' prior appearances when preparing for other guests, using him as an example of ideal talk show behavior. Johnny would tell nervous guests, just relax and have fun with it. Like Burt Reynolds does, recalled a talent coordinator who worked on the show. That was the highest praise heckled offer. While Reynolds represented the playful, unpredictable energy Carson enjoyed, his next favorite guest brought something entirely different. Intellectual depth that allowed Carson to show a side of himself. Rarely seen on television that would be on the same stage together and no harm had come to you. That is true. That is no harm. And then you were on that show. The Orson Welles, the genius who fascinated Carson. When most people think of Johnny Carson, they picture the affable, joke-cracking host who specialized in celebrity interviews and comedy sketches. But those who knew Carson well understood he had a deeply intellectual side, one that emerged most clearly when Orson Welles appeared on The Tonight Show. Johnny was genuinely in awe of Orson, revealed a producer who worked on several of Welles's appearances. Not stoic like he sometimes seemed with Jimmy Stewart, but intellectually fascinated. When Orson was scheduled, Johnny would actually read up on subjects he thought might come up: history, literature, theater. He never did that for other guests. What made Welles different from Carson's other favorites was the nature of their conversations. Rather than focusing on Hollywood gossip or promotional chatter, their discussions veered into art, politics, magic, and history, revealing depths to Carson that surprised even longtime viewers. Those interviews showed the Johnny that his friends knew but the public rarely saw, explained a writer who worked closely with Carson, well-read, curious about the world, capable of discussing Shakespeare as aciously as he could tell a joke about a giraffe. One of the most memorable Welles appearances featured the legendary director performing magic tricks live on air. Complex illusions that genuinely stunned the crew and delighted Carson, who had a lifelong interest in magic. Johnny's face during those tricks was priceless, recalled a camera operator. He was like a kid at a magic show, completely caught up in the wonder of it. After one particularly impressive illusion, Johnny turned to the camera during the commercial break and said, "Did you folks at home see that? That was real magic, not TV magic." What Carson particularly appreciated about Welles was his authenticity. Despite his towering reputation as one of cinema's greatest directors, Welles would discuss his failures as openly as his successes, a candor that Carson found refreshing in an industry built on carefully maintained images. Orson would talk about getting fired from movies or having projects canned without any off-usual Hollywood spin, noted a producer. Johnny respected that honesty enormously. He hated when celebrities tried to pretend everything they touched turned to gold. While their conversations sometimes became so involved that they challenged the light entertainment format of The Tonight Show, Carson never rushed Welles or tried to steer him toward more accessible topics. Instead, he seemed to relish the opportunity to engage on a different level than his usual interviews allowed. Johnny once told me those conversations with Orson were some of the most satisfying moments of his career, revealed a friend of Carson's. He said, "For a few minutes, I get to be myself rather than Johnny Carson, if that makes any sense." While Welles represented the intellectual stimulation Carson craved, his next favorite guest embodied something equally important to the host, the comedy tradition that shaped his own career legend. Would you welcome, please, Jack Benny, the master who inspired Carson. When Jack Benny appeared on The Tonight Show, viewers witnessed a rare reversal of Carson's usual demeanor. The normally composed, controlling host transformed into an appreciative student in the presence of one of comedy's greatest pioneers. "He was the reason I do what I do," Carson once admitted to a close colleague after a Benny appearance. "Watching him was my masterclass in comedy." Benny's influence on Carson's style was evident to anyone familiar with both men's work. The perfect timing, the subtle reactions, the ability to get laughs with just a look or pause. All hallmarks of Benny's approach that Carson had studied and adapted for his own performances. Johnny's entire comedic philosophy came from Jack, explained a writer who worked with Carson during the 1970s. The idea that the host didn't need to dominate with punchlines, that reactions could be funnier than actions, that silence could get bigger laughs than words, that was pure Benny, and Johnny knew it. When Benny visited The Tonight Show, Carson's admiration was palpable. He would laugh more genuinely, listen more attentively, and show a difference rarely seen with other guests. According to staff members, Carson would even change the physical setup of the interviews, positioning himself to give Benny the optimal camera angles. Johnny would actually tell the directors, "Make sure you get Jack's reactions, not mine," recalled a former producer. That was unheard of. Carson literally directing attention away from himself to showcase someone else. It showed how much he respected Benny's mastery. What made these appearances particularly special was the generational torch passing they represented. Benny, born in 1894, had pioneered radio comedy when Carson was just a child. By the time Benny appeared in The Tonight Show in the 1970s, He was in his late 70s and early 80s. Yet, his timing remained impeccable. Watching Johnny interact with Jack was like seeing comedy history in real time, noted a director who worked on several of Benny's appearances. Here was the current king of late-night talking with the man who had essentially invented the formula decades earlier. Johnny never forgot that lineage. Carson's respect for Benny extended far beyond their on-air interactions. According to those close to Carson, he kept a framed photo of Benny in his office, the only celebrity picture he displayed in his private workspace. That photo said everything about who Johnny admired most, explained a longtime friend. Not